The morning started like any other Tuesday on planet Earth. People woke up, made their coffee, and prepared for another ordinary day. Nobody knew that in just a few hours, everything would change forever. Admiral Cole sat in her office at the United Earth Defense Headquarters, reading through routine reports while sipping her morning coffee. She had served in the military for 32 years, and she had seen many strange things during her career, but nothing could have prepared her for what was about to happen. Her aide, a young man named Christopher, burst through the door without knocking. His face was white as a sheet, and his hands were shaking as he held a tablet computer. "Ma'am, you need to see this right now," he said, his voice trembling. "We received a transmission. It came from deep space, very deep space." Put down her coffee cup and took the tablet from his hands. What she saw on the screen made her blood run cold. It was an alien face, a creature unlike anything she had ever seen before. It had scales as black as night and eyes that glowed like burning amber. The creature looked ancient and powerful and very, very angry. At that same moment, the same transmission was playing on every screen across the planet. Television sets, computer monitors, smartphones, and billboards all showed the same terrifying image. The world stopped moving as 8 billion humans watched an alien speak to them for the first time in recorded history. "Humans of Earth," the creature said, its voice deep and rumbling like thunder rolling across mountains. "I am High Commander of the Dominion. For 50,000 years, our empire has ruled over 12 galaxies. We have conquered countless worlds and brought thousands of species under our control. None have ever stood against us and survived." The creature paused, and its amber eyes seemed to burn even brighter with hatred. 3,000 of your years ago, our sacred fleet came to your world to claim it for the Dominion. Your ancestors, primitive creatures armed with nothing but bronze weapons and stone tools, somehow managed to destroy that fleet. This insult has never been forgotten. This wound has never healed. For 3,000 years we have waited. For 3,000 years we have rebuilt our forces. For 3,000 years we have dreamed of this moment. The image shifted to show something that made millions of people across Earth gasp in terror. It was a fleet of warships, thousands of them, each one the size of a small moon. They filled the screen like an ocean of metal and death, blocking out the stars behind them. "We are coming," continued. "In 14 of your days our fleet will reach your solar system. We will burn your cities. We will enslave your people. We will make you pay for what your ancestors did. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. There will be only death." The transmission ended, and silence fell across the planet. Within hours, the United Nations called an emergency session. Leaders from every nation on Earth gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their faces showing various degrees of fear, anger, and confusion. Diplomats whispered to each other in frantic tones. Military advisors checked their tablets and made urgent phone calls. The mood in the room was tense and heavy, like the air before a terrible storm. Secretary General stood at the podium, his hands gripping the edges so tightly that his knuckles turned white. He was a calm man by nature, someone who had spent his entire career solving problems through peaceful discussion. But this problem seemed to have no solution. "Ladies and," he said, his voice slightly unsteady, "we have confirmed that the transmission is genuine. Our deep space sensors have detected the approaching fleet. They are real. They are coming. And according to our best estimates, they will arrive in exactly 13 days and 17 hours. The room erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted over each other, demanding answers that nobody had. Some called for immediate surrender to save as many lives as possible. Others demanded that Earth fight back with everything it had, even if victory seemed impossible. A few simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process what was happening. But in one corner of the room, someone was laughing. General Hayes, the commander of Earth's Joint Defense Force, stood with her arms crossed and a smile on her face. She was a woman in her late 50s with short gray hair and sharp blue eyes that had seen countless battles. When she laughed, it was not a nervous sound or a desperate attempt to hide her fear. It was genuine amusement, as if someone had just told her a very good joke at a dinner party. The laughter cut through the chaos, and slowly the room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at her. "Something funny, General?" Secretary asked, his voice carrying a hint of irritation. Wiped her eyes and composed herself, though the smile never fully left her face. "I apologize, Mr. Secretary, it's just 3,000 years. They waited 3,000 years for a rematch." "This is hardly a laughing matter," one of the diplomats snapped. "They are coming to destroy us." "Oh, I understand the gravity of the situation," replied, walking toward the center of the room. "But I don't think our friends out there understand it at all. You see, 3,000 years ago, humanity was just starting to figure out how to work with iron. We hadn't invented the wheel in some parts of the world. We communicated by sending runners across vast distances because we didn't have any other way. And somehow, some way, our ancestors managed to destroy an alien invasion fleet." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Now, those aliens have spent 3,000 years preparing for round two. 3,000 years of building ships and weapons and training soldiers, all for the purpose of coming back here and finishing what they started. But here's the thing that makes me laugh." Turned to face the screen, where the image of the alien fleet had been displayed. They prepared to fight the humans of 3,000 years ago. Bronze spears and wooden shields and prayers to gods they hoped would protect them. That's the enemy they're expecting. That's the enemy they've built their entire war strategy around. She smiled again, and this time there was something fierce and proud in that smile. "They have absolutely no idea what we've become." The room was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, understanding began to dawn on the faces of the people present. Admiral Cole, who had joined the assembly, stepped forward to stand beside her colleague. "The general is correct," said. "Our preliminary analysis of the alien fleet shows technology that we abandoned centuries ago. Their weapons, their engines, their defensive systems, all of it is hopelessly outdated by our current standards. They conquered 12 galaxies and then stopped improving. They never needed to. Every species they encountered was either too primitive or too afraid to challenge them." "So what are you saying?" Secretary asked. And exchanged a look, and both women smiled. "We're saying, Mr. Secretary, that the Dominion has made a very serious mistake. They came here expecting to find sheep. Instead, they're about to meet the wolves." The assembly erupted again, but this time the voices carried something different. Not fear, not panic, something that had been absent just moments before. Hope. Deep beneath the rocky surface of Mars, in a facility that officially did not exist, Dr. Caroline Beck worked through the night analyzing every scrap of data humanity had gathered about the approaching alien fleet. She was a thin woman with tired eyes and messy brown hair, the kind of scientist who often forgot to eat when she was focused on a problem. Right now, she was very focused indeed. Around her, dozens of other researchers worked at their stations, their faces lit by the glow of holographic displays. They studied weapons signatures, engine emissions, shield frequencies, and hull compositions. They ran simulations and built models and argued about theories. They did what humans had always done when faced with a challenge. They tried to understand it. "The results are conclusive," Caroline said during her video conference with the Joint Military Command. Her voice was calm and measured, the voice of someone who dealt in facts rather than emotions. "The fleet represents technology that we would consider extremely advanced by the standards of ancient Earth, but hopelessly primitive by our current capabilities." On the screen, Admiral Cole leaned forward with interest. "Break it down for us, Doctor. What exactly are we dealing with?" Caroline pulled up a holographic model of a warship. It was an impressive vessel, bristling with weapons and armored with thick plating. To the untrained eye, it looked terrifying. Their primary weapons appear to be kinetic projectile launchers and directed energy beams. Powerful, certainly. A single shot from their main cannons could level a small city, but their targeting systems are based on optical tracking with minimal predictive capability. Against stationary or slow-moving targets, they would be devastating. Against our current combat vessels, which can execute evasive maneuvers at speeds their computers cannot process, they would struggle to land a single hit. She switched to a different display showing the alien shield technology. Their defensive systems rely on dense graviton fields that can deflect most physical impacts and absorb considerable amounts of energy. Again, very impressive by historical standards. However, they appear to have no protection whatsoever against quantum state disruption weapons, which have been standard equipment on our naval vessels for the past 200 years. Our weapons would pass through their shields as if they did not exist. General Hayes, who was also on the call, rubbed her chin thoughtfully. What about their engines? How fast can they move? That's perhaps the most telling detail of all, Caroline replied. They're using plasma-based propulsion systems, efficient and reliable, but limited to speeds with a maximum acceleration that our civilian cargo ships exceeded 3 centuries ago. They have no fold space capability that we can detect. The journey from their home territory to our solar system took them almost a decade of real time. The implications hung heavy in the virtual air. Admiral Cole spoke what everyone was thinking. They spent 10 years traveling here to fight an enemy that can cross the same distance in a matter of hours. Meanwhile, in Earth orbit, Captain Daniel stood on the bridge of his ship, the Liberty's Edge. It was one of 600 vessels in Earth's third expeditionary fleet, a sleek and deadly craft that bore no resemblance to the primitive rockets that had first carried humans into space. Daniel was a tall man with dark skin and calm brown eyes, a 20-year veteran of the United Earth Navy who had seen action in 3 different star systems. "Status report," he said, settling into his command chair. Lieutenant Commander Susan Park, his tactical officer, looked up from her console. She was a small woman with sharp features and quick hands, someone who could process tactical data faster than most computers. "All systems are operating at full capacity, sir. Weapons charged and ready. Fold space drives are calibrated and standing by. The rest of the fleet reports similar readiness." Daniel nodded and stared out the main viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, an alien armada was approaching with dreams of conquest and revenge. They had no idea what was waiting for them. "You know," Susan said quietly, "my grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, before we had fold space, before we had quantum weapons, before we spread across the stars. She said that her grandmother remembered a time when humans had never even left the planet." "Hard to imagine," Daniel replied. "She told me that back then, people used to wonder if we were alone in the universe. They looked up at the sky and asked themselves if there was anyone else out there." Susan smiled slightly. "I guess now we know the answer." "We've known for a while," Daniel said. "We've encountered 17 different intelligent species since we started exploring the galaxy. Most of them are friendly enough. A few have been difficult, but none of them have ever come at us like this, with an entire war fleet and 3,000 years of hatred behind them." "Do you think they know about how much we've changed?" Daniel shook his head. "I doubt it. The galaxy is a big place, and they have been focused on their own territory for thousands of years. They probably didn't even know we still existed until recently. They came here expecting to find the same primitive species their ancestors encountered. They're going to be very surprised." Back on Earth, people were reacting to the news in different ways. Some panicked, rushing to buy supplies and find shelter. Others the reality of what was happening, insisting it must be some kind of hoax or misunderstanding. But a surprising number simply went about their daily lives, trusting that someone somewhere would handle the problem. They were right to trust. In military bases and research facilities across human space, preparations were being made. Ships were being armed and crews were being briefed. Strategies were being developed and contingency plans were being refined. The machinery of human defense, built over centuries of expansion and occasional conflict, was coming fully online for the first time in generations. General Hayes held a press conference to address the public's concerns. She stood at a podium with the flag of United Earth behind her, looking as calm and confident as if she were discussing the weather. "I want to be very clear about something," she said, her voice carrying across countless broadcasts. "The Dominion has declared war on humanity. They have announced their intention to destroy our civilization and enslave our people. We take this threat seriously, and we are responding accordingly." She paused and her expression hardened. "However, I also want the people of Earth and all human settlements to understand something important. We are not the same species that they encountered 3,000 years ago. We have grown. We have learned. We have become something that they cannot even begin to comprehend. They think they are coming to slaughter helpless victims. They are wrong." A reporter raised her hand. "General, can you give us any specifics about our defensive capabilities?" Smiled, and there was something almost predatory in that expression. "I can tell you this much. Within the next 24 hours, we will be sending a diplomatic envoy to meet the fleet. We will offer them one chance to turn around and go home peacefully. If they refuse that offer, then we will demonstrate exactly what humanity has become in the last 3,000 years. I don't think they will enjoy the lesson." The press conference ended, and the world waited. In the darkness of space, the fleet continued its approach, confident in their superiority, certain of their victory. They sang ancient songs of conquest and dreamed of the revenge they would soon claim. They had no idea that they were flying straight into the jaws of something far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. They thought they were predators coming to hunt prey. They were about to discover that they were nothing of the sort. Humanity had spent 3,000 years preparing for this moment, even if they had not known exactly what they were preparing for. Every war they had fought, every disease they had cured, every problem they had solved, all of it had made them stronger. All of it had pushed them to innovate, to adapt, to become more than they were before. They had conquered 12 galaxies by being the biggest and the strongest. But humanity had survived by being clever, by being resourceful, by refusing to accept that anything was impossible. That difference was about to matter very much indeed. Grand Admiral Orr stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the stars slide past through the massive viewing portal. He was old, even by standards, his black scales faded to gray in places and his amber eyes dimmed by centuries of service. But his mind was still sharp, and his hatred still burned bright. He had waited his entire life for this moment. As a young warrior, he had heard the stories of the great shame, the impossible defeat that his ancestors had suffered at the hands of primitive humans. Those stories had filled him with rage and determination. He had sworn an oath that one day he would personally lead the fleet that would avenge that ancient wrong. Now that day had finally come. "How long until we reach the human system?" he asked, his voice rumbling through the quiet command deck. 12 more rotations, Grand Admiral," his navigation officer replied. "The fleet is proceeding on schedule. All vessels report full combat readiness." Or allowed himself a rare smile, his lipless mouth stretching to reveal rows of sharp teeth. "Excellent. Send the bombardment fleet ahead. 200 ships should be more than enough to soften their defenses before the main force arrives. Let the humans feel our power. Let them know that death is coming." The order was given, and 200 warships broke away from the main formation. They accelerated toward the distant yellow star that the humans called Sol, their crews singing ancient hymns of conquest that had been passed down through countless generations of warriors. On board one of those ships, A young commander named prepared his crew for battle. He had never faced a real enemy before. In all his years of service, he had only participated in training exercises and ceremonial displays. The species that the Dominion conquered rarely put up any meaningful resistance. Most surrendered the moment they saw the fleet appear in their skis. Those that did not were crushed so quickly that it barely counted as combat. But these humans were supposed to be different. These humans had somehow destroyed a fleet 3,000 years ago. Did not believe the old stories, not really. How could primitive creatures with pointed sticks defeat advanced warships? There had to be some other explanation, some mistake or accident that had been exaggerated over time. Still, he felt a small flutter of excitement at the thought that he might actually get to fight a real battle. He would soon regret that excitement. The bombardment fleet was still several hours away from Earth when their sensors detected something strange. A single vessel, incredibly small, had appeared directly in their path. It had not been there a moment ago. It had simply materialized out of nothing, as if it had stepped through a door from somewhere else. "What is that?" demanded, staring at his display screen. "Unknown, Commander. It appears to be a human vessel, one ship. No others detected in the area." One ship, against 200, felt a mixture of confusion and insult. Did the humans think this was some kind of joke? Then the small ship broadcast a message. It appeared on every screen in the bombardment fleet, showing a human male with light skin and brown hair and a friendly smile. He wore a military uniform and seemed completely relaxed, as if he were chatting with old friends rather than addressing an invasion force. "Hello there, friends," the human said in perfect, which should have been impossible. "My name is Chief Petty Officer Cole, United Earth Navy. I'm here to give you folks a chance to turn around and go home. No hard feelings, no consequences. Just turn those big, beautiful ships of yours around and fly back the way you came." The bombardment fleet commander, a grizzled veteran named, laughed so hard that he nearly choked. The sound echoed across the communication channels as other officers joined in the laughter. One ship, one tiny ship, offering them a chance to retreat. It was the most absurd thing any of them had ever heard. "Destroy it," ordered when he finally caught his breath. "Make an example of this fool. Show the humans what happens to those who mock the Dominion." Every weapon in the fleet fired at once. Energy beams and kinetic rounds and plasma torpedoes filled the space where the human ship floated. The barrage lasted for 30 seconds, enough firepower to crack a small moon. When the weapons fell silent and the sensors cleared, the human ship was still there, completely untouched. A shimmering field of energy surrounded it, glowing softly in the aftermath of the attack. The field had absorbed everything thrown at it without any visible strain. Cole's image reappeared on their screens. His smile had not changed at all. "That tickled. Listen, I really am trying to help you here. Last chance, fellas, turn around and go home." Laughter died in his throat. He ordered another barrage, then another. By the fourth attempt, his weapons were overheating and the human ship had begun to drift lazily through the formation, weaving between vessels as if bored. "What is happening?" demanded. "Why can't we hit it?" Nobody had an answer. Their targeting systems could track the human ship easily enough, but it moved in ways that prediction. It changed direction instantly, without any apparent acceleration or deceleration. It was there, and then it was somewhere else, and their weapons fired at where it had been rather than where it was. Then Cole sighed, and his expression shifted to something almost sad. "Well," he said, "I tried." The human ship vanished again, and then, one by one, the vessels began to go dark. It started with the smaller escort ships. Their engines simply stopped working. Their weapons went cold. Their lights flickered and died. Then the larger destroyers followed, then the cruisers, then even the massive battleships. In the space of 17 minutes, 200 warships became 200 helpless metal boxes drifting in the void. Watched in horror as his own ship lost power. The emergency lighting came on, casting everything in a dim red glow. The life support system stuttered, then stabilized at minimum levels. They were alive but completely helpless. A new broadcast reached every ship in the disabled fleet. This time it was a woman's voice, calm and professional. "Attention bombardment force. Your vessels have been disabled. All systems except basic life support have been shut down. Your crews are alive and will remain so for approximately 6 hours before your oxygen is depleted. We strongly recommend that your main fleet begin rescue operations immediately." There was a pause, and then the woman continued. "This concludes our demonstration. Any further hostile action by forces will be met with proportional response. We do not wish to cause unnecessary death. We do, however, wish to make our position very clear. You cannot win this war. You cannot even compete in this war. The choice of whether to continue is yours." The transmission ended. Grand Admiral Orr received the news in stunned silence. 200 ships disabled in minutes by a single human vessel. It was impossible. It was unthinkable. And yet it had happened. For the first time in his very long life, Orr felt something he had never experienced before. It was an unfamiliar sensation, cold and uncomfortable, settling into his chest like a stone. He was beginning to realize that it was fear. "Send rescue ships for the bombardment fleet," he ordered, his voice hollow. "And bring me everything we know about human military capabilities, everything." His officers scrambled to obey, but Orr barely noticed. He stared out at the stars, at the distant yellow sun that marked his destination, and wondered for the first time if perhaps the old stories had not been exaggerated after all. Perhaps the humans really were something special. Perhaps they really had destroyed that ancient fleet not through luck or accident, but through some quality that they did not possess. And if that was true, then what had they become in the 3,000 years since? Or did not know the answer to that question, but he was becoming increasingly afraid that he was about to find out. Grand Admiral Orr sat alone in his private chambers, surrounded by holographic displays that showed the terrible truth of his situation. 200 ships disabled without a single human casualty. His crews rescued, but his pride shattered. Reports from his intelligence officers that painted a picture he did not want to believe. The humans had changed. They had changed so much that the war fleet, the most powerful military force in 12 galaxies, was now little more than a collection of antique toys compared to what they faced. A chime sounded at his door. His aide entered with news that made the old admiral's scales twitch with surprise. "Grand Admiral, a human diplomatic vessel has requested permission to dock with the Eternal Dominion. They wish to speak with you directly." Or considered refusing. He considered ordering his fleet to continue the attack, to fight until the last ship was destroyed. That was what honor demanded. That was what 3,000 years of hatred required. But he was old, and he was tired, and he was beginning to understand that honor meant nothing against an enemy who could end you without breaking a sweat. So instead of refusing, he granted permission. The human ship arrived an hour later. It was a small craft, elegant and sleek, moving with a grace that vessels could never match. It passed through the Eternal Dominion's shields as if they did not exist, which of course they did, but which apparently made no difference at all. The human ambassador was not what Orr had expected. She was a small creature, barely reaching his chest, with gray-streaked hair and kind eyes that seemed to look right through him. She wore simple clothing without armor or weapons, and she showed no fear as she stood before a being 3 times her size in the heart of an enemy warship. "Grand Admiral," she said, inclining her head in a gesture of respect. "My name is, I am a special envoy from Earth. Thank you for receiving me." Or studied her for a long moment. He had killed creatures like her by the thousands during his career. He had watched entire species grovel at his feet, begging for mercy that he rarely granted. But this tiny human stood before him as an equal, and somehow that bothered him more than anything else. "You destroyed 200 of my ships," he said flatly. "We disabled them," corrected gently. "There is an important difference. Every single member of those crews is still alive. We could have killed them instantly. We chose not to." "Why? We came here to destroy you. We announced our intention to wipe out your entire species." Smiled and took a seat in one of the oversized chairs without waiting for an invitation. She moved with the casual confidence of someone who knew she had nothing to fear. "Because killing was never the point, Admiral. Perhaps violence is just a tool to get what you want. But humanity learned something different during our 3,000 years of development. We learned that real strength is not about destroying your enemies. It is about making destruction unnecessary." Or snorted a sound of contempt. "Pretty words, meaningless philosophy." "Is it?" Leaned forward, her voice gentle but steady. "You said it yourself. You waited 3,000 years for this moment. 3,000 years of planning, of rebuilding, of teaching your children to hate a species they had never met. 3,000 years of dreaming about revenge. And for what? To prove that you could defeat a species that had not even invented the wheel when your ancestors first arrived." The words stung more than Or wanted to admit. He said nothing. "We know what happened 3,000 years ago," continued. "Your scout fleet arrived at Earth and announced that our planet was now property of the Dominion. Your commanders expected our ancestors to surrender without a fight. When they refused, your forces moved to enslave them by force." She paused, and something like sadness crossed her face. "Our ancestors were farmers and shepherds. They had bronze weapons and wooden tools. They knew nothing of space travel or energy weapons or any of the technology your people possessed. By every logical measure, they should have been crushed in minutes." "They should have been," Or agreed bitterly. "But they were not. Somehow, against all odds, they found a way to win. They looked at certain defeat and refused to accept it. They fought with everything they had, and through courage and cleverness and sheer desperate determination, they destroyed your fleet." Eyes met his. "That is what humans do, Admiral. We face impossible situations and find ways through them. We refuse to accept that anything is truly beyond us." Or turned away, unable to hold her gaze. "You are saying you pity us." "I am saying I understand you. Your species conquered 12 galaxies and then stopped growing. You had no reason to change or improve or become more than you were. Every challenge you faced was easily overcome. Every enemy you encountered was quickly defeated. You became comfortable. You became static." Stood and walked to the viewing portal, looking out at the stars. "We never had that luxury. Every century brought new challenges for humanity, wars and plagues and natural disasters. We fought each other constantly, struggling over resources and territory and ideas. It was brutal and bloody and often pointless. Millions died in conflicts that accomplished nothing. We came close to destroying ourselves many times." She turned back to face him. "But every challenge also made us stronger. Every problem forced us to think harder, to work together, to find solutions that did not exist before. We developed new technologies not because we wanted to conquer others, but because we needed them to survive. We pushed the boundaries of what was possible because we had no other choice. And now we have spread across the stars. We have cured diseases that once killed millions. We have built ships that can cross galaxies in hours. We have developed weapons that your most advanced scientists cannot even begin to understand." His voice softened. "Your fleet came here expecting to find the same primitive humans your ancestors encountered. You prepared for an enemy that no longer exists. The humans you wanted revenge against have been gone for 3,000 years. We are something else entirely now." Or was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than before. "You could have destroyed us. You could have wiped out our entire fleet the moment we entered your space." "Yes, we could have." "Then why did you not?" returned to her seat, folding her hands in her lap. Because 3,000 years ago your fleet came to enslave our people. We fought back and we won, but it cost us nearly everything. Half our species died in that war. Cities were destroyed. Cultures were lost forever. We survived, but the scars ran deep. She paused, her expression thoughtful. For generations after that war, we told stories about the monsters from the sky, the demons who nearly ended us. We taught our children to fear the stars, to watch the heavens for signs of your return. And yes, we prepared. We built weapons and ships and defenses. We expected you to come back. But we did not for 3,000 years. No, you did not. And in that time, something changed within us. We realized that fear was not enough. Hatred was not enough. If we built our entire civilization around preparing for your return, we would become something twisted and dark. So we chose a different path. What path? Smiled again, and there was warmth in it despite everything. We chose to grow, to explore, to learn about the universe and our place in it. We chose to become strong not because we feared what might come, but because strength allowed us to help others. We found other species out there, Admiral. Younger races who needed guidance, older races who had wisdom to share. We built relationships and alliances and friendships. She stood and walked toward him, stopping just a few feet away. We do not want to destroy the Dominion. We do not want revenge for what your ancestors did. We want something much more difficult and much more valuable. We want to show you that there is another way. That conquest and domination are not the only paths to greatness, that you can be more than what you have been. Or stared at her, this tiny creature who spoke of mercy and growth to a conqueror of worlds. Part of him wanted to laugh. Part of him wanted to have her killed where she stood. But another part, a part he had not known existed, wanted to listen. Why, he asked finally, why do you care what happens to us? His answer was simple and devastating. Because 3,000 years ago, your ancestors taught us an important lesson. They showed us that the universe is vast and dangerous and full of things that want to destroy us. We survived because we learned from that lesson. Now we want to teach you the lesson we learned in return. And what lesson is that? That being powerful is not the same as being strong. That true strength comes from building things up, not tearing them down. That the measure of a civilization is not how many enemies it can destroy, but how many allies it can create. She extended her hand toward him, palm up. We are offering you a choice, Grand Admiral. You can continue this war and lose everything, or you can do something your species has never done before. You can grow. The final negotiation took place on neutral ground. Human engineers built a station in the asteroid belt in a matter of days, a feat that left the delegation speechless. What would have taken their workers months to accomplish, humans achieved between breakfast and dinner. It was just another reminder of how far behind they had fallen. Grand Admiral led his advisors into the meeting chamber, a simple room with metal walls and a large table in the center. Across from them sat the human representatives, Admiral Cole, Ambassador, and General Hayes. They looked relaxed and patient, like people who had all the time in the world. Because they did. They held all the power here and everyone knew it. Before we begin, Orr said, settling his massive form into a specially constructed chair, I need to understand something. You could have destroyed us. You could have wiped out our entire species without losing a single soldier. Why didn't you? General Hayes answered, her voice matter of fact. Because that was never the goal. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Admiral. We don't want to conquer other species or build an empire. We just want to live our lives and explore the universe and maybe help others along the way. That seems naive, one of Orr's advisors muttered. Power is the only thing that matters. If you have it, you use it. That is the way of things. That's been your way, replied gently. It doesn't have to be the only way. Admiral Cole leaned forward, her expression serious. Let me be direct with you. We've studied the Dominion extensively. We know about the species you've conquered over the past 50,000 years. We know how you strip away their cultures and identities and force them into your mold. We know about the countless civilizations that have been erased because they couldn't or wouldn't submit to your rule. Or scales flushed with something that might have been shame, though he would never admit it. We also know, continued, that underneath all of that your species is not so different from ours. You love your children, you create art and music, you dream about the future and remember the past. You're not monsters, Admiral. You're just people who got stuck in a pattern that stopped working a long time ago. The negotiations lasted 7 days. They discussed everything: military arrangements, cultural exchanges, economic partnerships, and scientific collaboration. The humans offered something they had never encountered in their entire history: genuine partnership. Not submission, not servitude, not the hollow piece of defeated enemies waiting for their chance at revenge. Actual cooperation between equals. It was confusing, it was uncomfortable, and slowly, gradually it became appealing. On the 5th day, General Hayes made a presentation that changed everything. She stood before the assembled delegates with a holographic display showing a map of the known universe. "This is what we've explored so far," she said, highlighting a region of space that dwarfed the Dominion. "We've encountered hundreds of species, some friendly, some hostile, some so strange that we're still trying to understand them. The universe is vast and full of wonders and dangers that neither of our species can fully comprehend alone." She zoomed the display out, showing more and more of the cosmic structure. "Out there, beyond what either of us has explored, there are things we can't even imagine yet. Threats we haven't prepared for, opportunities we haven't discovered. The question isn't whether we'll face those challenges. The question is whether we'll face them together or alone." Or watched the display with ancient eyes that had seen countless worlds. "You're saying you need us. I'm saying we could help each other. Your species has 50,000 years of experience in maintaining a galactic civilization. You know things about logistics and governance and resource management that we're still learning. And we have technologies and perspectives that could help you grow in ways you've never considered. We came here to destroy you," Or said slowly. "We spent 3,000 years preparing for this war. Our entire society has been shaped around hatred of humanity. How do we simply let that go?" Spoke up. "You don't, not overnight, not easily. Changing the direction of a civilization is the work of generations, not days. But it starts with a choice, a single decision to try something different." She stood and walked around the table until she was standing beside Or. Despite the enormous difference in their sizes, she showed no fear. 3,000 years ago, our ancestors made a choice. They could have surrendered to your fleet. They could have accepted slavery and lived under your rule. Instead, they chose to fight, even when fighting seemed hopeless. That choice cost them everything, but it also gave them everything. It gave us our freedom. It gave us our future. She placed her small hand on his scaled arm, a gesture of connection that transcended species. "Now you have a choice of your own. You can cling to the past, to the hatred and pride that brought you here. You can fight a war you cannot win and lose everything your species has built. Or you can do something braver. You can admit that you were wrong. You can accept help from those you once called enemies. You can grow." The chamber fell silent. Every eye was on Or, waiting for his response. The old admiral thought about his life. He thought about the wars he had fought, the worlds he had conquered, the enemies he had crushed. He thought about the songs of glory that his people sang, celebrating victories over species that had never had any chance of winning. He thought about what it meant to be, what it had always meant: strength, dominance, power. And then he thought about what the human ambassador had said, about building things up instead of tearing them down, about measuring civilization by allies created rather than enemies destroyed, about growing. For the first time in 3,000 years, A leader considered the possibility that there might be more to existence than conquest. "My people will not understand," he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "They have been raised to hate humanity. They have been taught that vengeance is our sacred duty." "Then teach them something new," General Hayes said simply. "You're their leader. Lead them somewhere better." Or closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed in their amber depths. Something old and tired had given way to something new and uncertain but alive. "Your ancestors laughed in the face of our invasion," he said quietly. "Now I understand why." "Why is that?" asked. "Because they knew something we did not, something it took us 3,000 years to learn." His alien features shifted into something that might have been a smile. "There are worse things than losing a war." "Such as?" "Never having an enemy worth fighting, never being challenged, never having a reason to become more than you are." He looked around the room at the human faces watching him. "You forced us to grow 3,000 years ago. Perhaps you will force us to grow again." He extended his massive clawed hand toward General Hayes. It was a gesture he had seen the humans use, a symbol of trust and agreement. "We accept your offer of partnership. We will try this new way. We will learn." Took his hand, her small fingers barely wrapping around one of his claws. "Welcome to the future, Admiral. I think you're going to like it here." The treaty was signed the following morning. Historians would later mark it as one of the most significant moments in galactic history. The species that had come to enslave became the first true allies humanity had ever known. The war that was supposed to end in annihilation ended instead with handshakes and promises of cooperation. In the months and years that followed, things changed slowly but steadily. Scientists worked alongside human researchers, combining ancient knowledge with new discoveries. Cultural exchanges brought art and music and philosophy across the gap between species. Young traveled to human worlds to study, and young humans visited the Dominion to learn about their former enemies. It was not easy. 3,000 years of hatred did not disappear overnight. There were setbacks and conflicts and moments when it seemed like the alliance might fall apart. But every time it seemed darkest, someone remembered the choice that had been made in that small station in the asteroid belt. Someone remembered that growth was always painful but always worth it. And somewhere in the vastness of space, a universe that had long been dominated by fear and conquest began to change. Other species watched the unlikely alliance between humans and wondered if perhaps there was another way. Perhaps they too could choose something different. Perhaps they too could grow. 3,000 years of waiting had ended not with fire and death, but with laughter and an extended hand. The humans had won not by destroying their enemies, but by refusing to see them as enemies at all. They had won by believing that even the worst could become better, that even the darkest could find light. Perhaps the historians would write, that was the most human victory of all. Not a triumph of weapons or technology, but a triumph of hope. A triumph of the belief that tomorrow could always be better than today, if only you had the courage to reach for it. And in that belief, humanity showed the universe what it truly meant to be strong.